The famous Jedi prophecy of the Chosen One, the Sith, actually had one of their own. So, who exactly was the Chosen One of the Sith? Who was the fabled Sith Ari? And did anybody fulfill the prophecy of the Chosen One of the Sith Empire? While the Jedi had a prophecy of balance, what did the Sith believe would ultimately happen when their Chosen One arose in the galaxy? The prophecy of the Chosen One is the most famous in all of the Jedi lore, but as we all know, it wasn't the only Chosen One prophecy to exist within the Force. The Sith had their own prophecy dating back to the ancient days of the galaxy, contemporary with, and likely even predating the Jedi's Chosen One prophecy. The Sith of old spoke of a being that would be without limits, one which would both destroy and lead the Sith Order to greatness. They were known as the Sith Ari. We've spoken before about the Sith Ari within these archives by simply giving it some explanation and speculation. However, in today's video, we have decided to undertake the task of confirming once and for all who fulfilled the prophecy of the Sith Chosen One. Who was the Sith Ari? Like all prophecies though, nothing is ever straightforward, and everything is up to conjecture of course. But we believe that by analyzing the most likely candidates and comparing their actions with each line of the Sith Ari's prophecy, we aim to nail down who truly was the Chosen One of the Sith. Who was the Dark Mirror to Anakin Skywalker? Before we begin though, if you've been enjoying our deep dive into all Star Wars lore, reach out with the Force and crush that subscribe button if you haven't yet. It is your destiny. We have foreseen it. Now acolytes, let us begin. To examine the origins of the Sith Ari, we must travel back to the year 28,000 BBY, 3,000 years before the formation of the Galactic Republic. In this day, the Sith world of Korriban was still primitive and tribalistic, constantly at war due to their nature in the dark side, a savage species, one who had not yet learned to control their innate power. This would all change though, with the coming of a great warrior, one who would rise above his red brethren, a member of the species by the name of Adis. In the deep lore, King Adis is described as impossibly large and incredibly powerful in combat. Adis wielded two force-imbued axes which were so heavy that only the strongest of the Massassi, the Sith, were able to wield even one of them. By proving himself in battle and rising above the rest of his kin through bloodshed alone, Adis would be named king over all the pure-blooded Sith people with one roar, a rally of all of them beneath his single banner, ceasing their infighting, uniting for the first time in the history of the Sith under the House of the Axe. The reign of the Axe of King Adis would last 300 years as the Dark Lord kept himself alive through the dark side itself. The Sith people all worshipped Adis as a god, but he was not a god, he was simply a king. But with the rule of King Adis is the first known writing of the Sith Ari in its very origins. King Adis was the original founder of the title, a title given to him by the Kasai priests, the Sith at the time who had their ear most attuned to the whispers of the dark side. When the ancient conquerors, the Rakata, came to Korriban and attempted to overthrow Adis and his grand empire, they were eventually driven back by the primitive Sith people, led alone by the powerful axe of King Adis. Adis, who fought them off so brutally that he single-handedly forced them to retreat his world, proving that perhaps he was more than a king. Adis would decimate wave after wave of Rakata before eventually succumbing to his injuries, giving his life for the betterment of his own people. The prophecy of the Sith Ari would begin here, with their supposedly being foretold the second coming of their god king, one who would take upon them the title and rule their people yet again. According to the Sith Lady Sorceress Sin, a powerful sorcerer, the title roughly translates to Overlord, and the many Kasai priests believed that the prophecy began and ended with King Adis. However, other Sith purebloods held hope, and the prophecy was eventually passed down through the generations. Importantly though, the prophecy was never written, as the Kasai priests considered it to be too sacred to be placed on paper. With this though, we found some issues and conflicting versions of the Sith Ari prophecy. However, the essence of the Sith Ari prophecy is three very strange lines. These lines are as follows. The Sith Ari will be free of limits. The Sith Ari will lead the Sith and destroy them. The Sith Ari will raise the Sith from death and make them stronger than before. The prophecy of the Sith Ari was so important to the purebloods that even Ajunta Pao, the first ever true Dark Lord of the Sith, who killed the Sith pure-blooded king and set himself up as the new god of the world, would refuse to claim the title. A junta saw how fiercely superstitious the Sith people were about the Sith Ari specifically, so the Dark Jedi wisely chose to leave the title alone and buried, fearing violent repercussions. Over the years, the Sith Ari's prophecy would fade into legend, and it was never really taken seriously from that point on. Ironically, most Sith Lords thought the prophecy was hogwash and superstition made by a primitive people. Oftentimes, the Sith don't believe in any prophecies due to their tendency to seize power for themselves. They do not subscribe themselves to the wish and the will of fate. Despite this though, there would certainly be a great many Sith who would speculate themselves to be this fabled Sith Ari. Even Darth Plagueis would have an interest in taking on the prophecy, as he stated this in his novel. Prophecies are generally wishful thinking. The fact that the Sith created their own savior myth is predictable, but the prophecy states that a being will arise who is free from restrictions, and who will destroy the Sith Order only to make them stronger than before. These statements seem uniquely specific to the actions I am taking now. I am not a creature of superstition, but if the robes of the Sith Ari fit, I see no reason not to claim the title. Plagueis convinced himself through his study of the midichlorians that he had achieved ultimate power, and that he was the Sith Chosen One. Sidious, though, would violently later refute this, stating that Plagueis was indeed limited by his own blindness and arrogance. But with all of that said, we believe that there could still be 4 candidates who stand strong for the title of the Sith Ari and the Chosen One of the dark side. The widely accepted individuals are Revan, Valkorion, Vader, Sidious, or Bane, but we believe that we can dwindle the list down further. We don't believe that Revan was the Sith Ari. Revan held insane power in the Force, and had experience both in the light and the dark, which of course could perhaps mean he was free of limits, and this could pertain to the prophecy. But while Revan led and destroyed the Sith for a time, it was only a small facet of the real Sith Order. Revan never truly destroyed the Sith, and while he may have had a hand in remaking them, he himself never personally did. Valkorion is up next, a man who nearly became a god, and of course did his fair share of destroying his Sith brethren, and he of course would eventually make them into something stronger, the reconstituted Sith Empire. However, Valkorion never really cared for the Sith at all, and abandoned their ideals completely. Valkorion instead chose to go off and start his own empire away and separate from the Sith. Not to mention the prophecy states that the Sith Ari will make the Sith stronger than before, and Vitiate's Sith Empire wasn't strong enough to truly overcome their enemies. But the next on the list we want to discuss is Vader, which may be a controversial decision. Vader would destroy the Sith, true, but Vader was not free of limits. In fact, he was defined by them. There have been theories that the Sith Chosen One and the Jedi Chosen One existed as the same individual. However, the actions of Anakin and Lord Vader do not line up. We cannot ignore that Anakin and Vader did not remake the Sith Order or raise them from the dead. Even if Anakin had not been burned on Mustafar, he never would have remade the Sith at all, as he did not care for them, planning to cast it aside as soon as he killed Sidious. Anakin wanted ultimate power for his family, and there is a possibility that the Skywalker family lineage could have been the new-founded Sith Order foretold by this prophecy. But again, Dark Lord Anakin was ready to squash the Sith once and for all once he got what he wanted from Sidious, and Vader cannot be the Sith Ari at any angle you look at it, although of course he still stands as the Jedi Chosen One. And now we have the final two, Sidious and Bane. Many of the Sith themselves have pointed to Bane as the second coming of the Sith Ari, including Plagueis and his own master in Tenebris, destroying and then remaking the Sith in the Rule of Two. Even the Bane trilogy of novels heavily implies that it was Bane that was the Sith Ari, and the true return of King Adus. But Sidious still seems to be a strong candidate, except for a single line where Darth Sidious falls short. It is true Sidious brought the Sith Order to unprecedented power, making them stronger than ever before, ruling the galaxy as its emperor, but he never destroyed the Sith. The lines of the prophecy specifically say that the Sith Ari will destroy the Sith and raise them from the dead. This is something that Sidious never did, but this is something that Lord Bane did. Interestingly, in the lore, Sidious would refute this, believing he was the Chosen One, and Sidious would cite the line that Darth Bane was not free of limits as the Sith Ari was foretold to be. Sidious still believed he was the Chosen One because he was far closer to ultimate power than Bane ever was. But the prophecy does not speak of power, it speaks of limits. It never states what parameters of limits this is referring to. Most believe that this could only mean power in the Force, but if that's the case, then no Sith has ever truly fulfilled this prophecy. I believe now that the line of being without restriction can also mean the restriction of doctrine of what came before. Bane freed himself from the limits set in place by the Sith before him. He reclaimed the ancient title of Darth. He welcomed conquest. He welcomed challenge. Bane freed himself from their limits, their doctrine of equality, and did not believe in the limits of knowledge that the contemporary Sith Lords did. Bane would be truly free of limits from his time, as he was not only more powerful than any Sith alive, but he was truly a free man from their indoctrination. This is something that the Sith deeply feared. Bane would lead the Sith briefly against the Jedi for a time, before utterly destroying them, tricking Lord Khan into detonating the thought bomb. And then, Lord Bane would raise them from the dead, make them stronger than ever, setting in motion the Rule of Two, established to have the Sith Order grow and evolve for centuries. Sidious may have been the fulfillment of the Rule of Two, but he was not the Chosen One. The Sith Ari, my acolytes, the title of the Sith Ari belongs to Lord Adis and Lord Bane. But with this, we have another theory that could at least bring some thought into the Sith Ari. Perhaps the Chosen One prophecy of the Sith is completely opposite to the Jedi because it is cyclical. What we mean is that Adis already existed and was the first chosen Sith, but there was never a Chosen One before Anakin. Perhaps there was a Sith Ari for every generation of Sith that needed one. Perhaps Revan, Valkorion, Bane, Sidious, and others were the Sith Ari for a time. A title that brings so much conflict because multiple Sith can wear the title if they claim it with their own actions. We must remember the core difference between the Jedi and the Sith. The Jedi wait on the Force, but the Sith take it. It would only make sense that the Chosen One is given by the Force, whereas the Sith Ari must be forcefully taken by the Sith. The way of the dark side is domination, and being the strongest to rule over the weak. King Adis didn't become the Sith Ari because he was born into it. He rose to power and commanded his rule through his strength. The same can be said for Valkorion, Bane, and Sidious. There is the possibility that the Sith Ari could be anyone strong enough to claim it for their own. And maybe this is the true meaning behind the line about having no limits. Paradoxically speaking, the true Sith Ari shouldn't be limited even by the lines of their own prophecies. But anyway, my friends, we would love to get your opinion down below. For this video especially, we put a lot of time, research, and effort into it, and we thank you for sticking around as long as you have. There is no channel without all of you, and I greatly appreciate you visiting the archives today. But now I leave with you the parting question that was posed all throughout this video. Who, my friends, is the Sith Ari?